Okay, we're going to talk about hiking the Appalachian Trail today. We'll talk a little bit about what the trail's like, the description, a little bit about the history of how it came to be. And then really the bulk of what I want to do is just give you all a feel for what it's like up there. So if you're considering going up and hiking all of it or a little bit of it, at least you'll kind of know what it's like. So we'll look at life on the trail, we'll look at the kind of people you meet, trail towns, some of the critters and plants you see, talk a little bit about trail magic and trail angels, which is a big part of the Appalachian Trail. There's some historical sites you go by, so we'll take a look at some of those and then talk briefly about some tips on what to think about if you're planning a hike. The Appalachian Trail Conservancy just came out with their latest magazine talking about what is the AT experience. And they really said, well, it's different for everybody, but it revolves around getting out in nature, having the challenge of hiking a long distance or kind of a long distance, at least overnight, a few nights, or for 3 or 4 months, whatever you decide to do. Having to rely on yourself in different situations, trying situations, but also connecting with others. And really the experience is different for everybody, but I think it all kind of revolves around those 4 items. But the AT nowadays, like a lot of us outdoor groups, has some challenges. And they're beginning to look at them and trying to see what they can do about them. There's certainly a lack of diversity on the trail. Accessibility is not there for people without money. It's expensive to buy the gear. It's expensive to get up to the trail. It's expensive to hike it. Not real expensive, but it does cost money. And so the trail has not been as accessible as it should be for different racial organizations or for people of low income. There's also still a safety issue on the trail. When you're hiking by yourself, man or woman, you've got some safety considerations. And the Appalachian Trail Conservancy also feels that maybe it's not as relevant today with today's youth as it was earlier. So those are all challenges that the Appalachian Trail is looking to deal with. Well, let's take a look at the trail for a minute. You can see on the map, starts in Georgia, goes to Maine. 2180 miles long when I filled this slide out, but it varies a little bit as they do trail maintenance and reroute trails a little bit. I think people now say about 2,200. Goes through 14 states, lots of national parks and national forests. There's not a real high elevation anywhere because the Appalachian Trails are very old mountains, but in the Smokies there at Kligman's Dome area, that's the highest elevation. But you don't need high elevation to make a trail difficult, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Over the years, since I retired, here's where I've hiked. Vermont, Massachusetts. I've got a daughter that lives up in Boston that could shuttle me out to the trail from those places. I had some family in DC, so West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Shenandoah Park. I had my hiking buddy Christy that lived in North Carolina, so Southwest Georgia, Smokies, and in that area. And then I lived close enough to Georgia that I was able to get to those. So all of those hikes were what we call section hikes, anywhere from say 50 to 150 miles when I went up there, sometimes by myself, most times with others. I also had 2 summer sessions with the Conorock Trail crew. They meet in Southwest Virginia in the Mount Rogers area right here. And for a week, you go out on the trail somewhere in Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and do trail maintenance. You camp out and work your tail off all day and stay out overnight. And those Conorock Trail crew sessions were great. And you might want to consider those for an AT experience. What do you see when you get out there? Trees, obviously, beautiful forests, lakes and ponds, beautiful vistas all over, although a lot of what your hike is in the middle of the woods. So it's nice when you get out to an open area where you can see a little bit. Christy, are you there? There you are.
Yep.
Here's on the right is Max Patch in North Carolina, beautiful open patch area. On the left is the famous McAfee Knob, where you can sit out on the edge of this rock cliff and look like you're thousands of feet up in the air. Here's the valley down here. Actually, the ground is right underneath here. But when you get the right angle, it really looks cool. And this is probably one of the most famous places on the trail. This is near Roanoke, Virginia. Lots of ups and downs. I put 2 profile maps in here just to give you an idea. This is a piece of Georgia here, and this kind of shows you the ups and downs on this piece of Georgia. And then here's a little piece in North Carolina. Each of these are what? That one's about 60 miles. That's about 100 miles. But I think the point is, when you think about doing the Appalachian Trail, you're going up and down, sometimes pretty steeply, all day long. And so it's not an easy hike, no matter where you are on the trail. A few overs, unders, arounds, and throughs. There's a nice rhododendron tunnel I remember in North Carolina. Fat Man Squeeze in Virginia, up in the Mount Rogers area. The trail was conceived by Benton Mackay in the 20s. He wrote an article, and the economy was getting pretty industrialized, and he was afraid people didn't have a chance to get out into nature. And so he thought, if there's a trail where people could get out and camp and get away, that would be good for folks and help them with their lives. Haven for those in the cities. He met with several groups to start forming regional clubs. They had an idea about where they wanted to go. They formed the Appalachian Trail Conference. When Myron Avery took over, then that really spearheaded completion of the trail by getting these different regional clubs to get out and build the trail. So initial completion you see in 37, and then the National Scenic Trails Act passed in 1968, designated this as a National Scenic Trail. I must say though, when they built this trail initially, they just went over one mountain or another. They just kind of drew lines and did what they wanted to do. So that's one reason why you have so many ups and downs. 3 to 4 million people hike the AT each year at some point for some reason. Day hikes, weekends, section hikes like what I did, through hikes. 20,000 people have hiked the whole trail. Maybe not through hike, but even if they did section hikes and did the whole thing and they're 2,000 milers, then they're counted in that group. I got the statistics from the 2019 through hiker statistics, those that logged in. 3,300 started. By the time they went through 1,000 miles, got to Harper's Ferry, they're cut in half. And then by the time they got to Katahdin, Maine at the end, maybe 15 or 20% completed. There's a lot of reasons. You get tired out, you get injured, you can't hack it. There's problems at home. There's all kinds of reasons why people drop out, that's for sure. When I hiked it the first time, we started at the approach trail to the Springer Mountain. So we hiked about 7 miles on this trail that goes up to the actual start. When we got to the start at that shelter, there were already 2 or 3 people that had planned a through hike the entire trail and had already quit just doing the 7-mile approach trail.
That first night, I thought we had made a major mistake.
I know. Yeah, we were hurting.
And then there's the boot tree at Neal's Gap.
Yes, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm
Okay.
going to talk about Neal's Gap here in a minute. Today, if you're planning to hike, I think you got to wait till next year. Some sections are closed. Most of the shelters are closed, although you can camp around them. Most of the privies are closed and not maintained. Shelters and privies are key to making your life easy on the trail. There's mandatory quarantines. If you get to New York and you said you started in Florida, you're supposed to be under a quarantine. Of course, I don't know how they're going to enforce that, but nonetheless, there's quarantines that you're liable for. And in the trail towns where you need to take a day off or resupply, some of those places are closed, maybe never to open again.
A lot of hostels.
Let's take a look a little bit at life on the trail. First of all, how do you know where to go? Well, you can order maps and guidebooks from the Appalachian Trail Conservancy or from on Amazon. So you can get maps, guidebooks, and data books. And they really, that information in whatever form you have really helps out because it tells you all about the trail towns. It shows you where water is, gives you elevation profiles and everything else. So they're really helpful. Of course, you can just follow the white blaze. The white blaze designates the Appalachian Trail. And normally, you can find your way by following the white blazes. And just like on the Florida Trail or anything else, if you see it offset to the left or right, that tells you there's a turn coming up to the left or right. You can follow some signs once in a while. There's Christy and I at the midpoint at one of our hikes, the midpoint of the trail. Or you can use the app that's called Gut Hook that's been around for a few years. I think there's about 9 sections, I think, of the trail for Gut Hook. They cost $9 or $10 each. You can buy a whole set for $70 or so, but this is online. So you can see that online, you can look at an elevation profile. You can look at a regular map, shows you where the shelters are, where the water is, where a campsite is. If you don't want to stay at the shelter, there's other places where you can camp. It shows you sometimes pictures of the shelters. It gives you a little information about the shelters, gives you information about the trail towns, all that online. So, and it's a GPS, so you don't need Wi-Fi to hook up to it. You just hook directly to satellite. But it does wear on your electronics, so you got to figure out how to keep things charged up. Now, the key for me on the Appalachian Trail was shelters. And these are always right off the AT, the little blue blaze. Sometimes you can see them. Sometimes it's a 1/8 quarter mile down the trail, but you can find a shelter. They're spaced about, for me, a day's hike apart, 7 to 12 miles. I think most of the time we averaged when we hiked maybe 1.5 miles an hour, something like that, because of the ups and downs. There's a lot of faster people that get in shape and do a lot more than that, but that's kind of what we did. So anyway, we didn't always stay at all of them. Sometimes we could pass one and stay at the next one. But anyway, they're 3-sided. They sleep. You can just roll your sleeping bag and mattress right out inside there and sleep right in there. They got a picnic table where you can sit and eat and cook. There's a privy. I'll talk about privies here in a second. All these shelters, practically all these shelters are situated so you're near a water source. And, if there's no droughts or anything like that going on, you can usually walk down a little trail and find a creek or something like that and get water. There's also areas, if you don't want to sleep with everybody that snores or you want to be by yourself, you can camp around there. And there's a fire ring too, so there's a good place where you can build a fire. There's also log books in there where people write notes to each other, give you an idea about what's ahead. So you can always read the shelter logs and kind of see what's going on. There's better shelters. There's good shelters and better shelters. This one, when I hiked through this area, the partnership shelter in the Mount Rogers area had a shower, and you could walk down this trail right here and order pizza and they'd deliver it to you. So that was pretty nice. I stayed in this shelter once. This is a 4-sided shelter with platforms inside, chestnut knob shelter. Beautiful, beautiful setting, as you can see. And so that was a nice shelter. It was almost like staying in a cabin. One of my favorites is in North Carolina, the Over Mountain Shelter, which is a big barn down here. And coming right through here, what they call the Over Mountain Trail, where farmers and loggers and people gathered during the Revolutionary War, came down the Over Mountain Shelter and helped the the troops beat the British down here in a big battle. And so that was the Over Mountain Trail. This is a view from the barn itself. Just as far as you can see, no civilization, no nothing, just a beautiful view.
Bill, you know the barn shelter's closed now.
Forever?
It's closed until they get some money to renovate it. It just became too dangerous. So it was closed last year. So you can still tent around it.
Right.
But you can't stay in it anymore.
So everybody say hello to Carolyn. She's the one that thru hiked, so she can pitch in when she needs to. Here's another great shelter that I can't remember. It was a couple miles off the trail, but I couldn't miss Upper Goose Pond Trail, where I could get blueberry pancakes and fresh spring water and friendly people, and so that was a real fun spot. Shelter life is shelter life. You know, you're tired after a hike, doesn't take long before you're in your sleeping bag, maybe play some cards, goof around. You see what kind of privacy you get. Not much, but you can always hook up with somebody. There's a guy we hooked up with, didn't we, Christy? We hiked with him for a few days. I can't remember his name.
Mm-hmm.
Privies.
Oh, no.
They're available at most shelters. Now, like I say, right now, they're closed up or something. I'm not sure whether they're blocked or what. The amount of privacy varies, but normally, just so you don't worry too much, the shelter and all the people are back this way. So sometimes you'll sit in a privy like that and look out and have the most beautiful view in the world, and you're still pretty private. There's some duff composting systems so that they don't get too bad. Don't bet on toilet paper, obviously. Not too many privies with 4 walls, but it's always great if you have one. Not all of them have a roof, but like I say, anything's better than digging a hole. Here's one that's pretty basic. Sometimes they have doors that are just enough to give you a little privacy. One of the favorite ones, I don't know if it's still there or not, a cribbage board. Here's a dual privy with a cribbage board in between.
Whoa. What? Did you go to that one? You went to Maine?
Let's take a look at trail towns. About every, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 days, something like that, you'll come to a town or near a town. And normally about then you need to resupply your food or go in and buy things you forgot or whatever, or just take a day off. Or maybe you're just section hiking, so you're just going to hike to a certain town and stop. So there's plenty of trail towns along the way. Christy and I stayed in the most famous hotel, I think, and my favorite place to stay was a Doyle Hotel in Duncannon, Pennsylvania. Did you stay there, Carol?
So cool.
Yes.
Oh, we loved
stayed
it.
there too. It was
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
amazing.
We loved it.
It looked like it hadn't been touched since the early
I
1900s.
know, it was great.
It wasn't. The same carpets. They hadn't cleaned since then.
That's right.
Right.
Buckets to catch water that leaked through the roof.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
It's
That's
totally
what we
part
like.
of the trail experience, though.
Yes.
So trail towns are a chance to take a day off, stay in a motel, get a shower, get some real food, resupply. We'll talk a little more about resupply, but if you can't carry all your food with you if you're hiking 2 weeks or 4 months, so you've got to mail your food ahead or just buy it in the store, one or the other. Get a little hospitality. 0 day means a day off. Meet up with other people. And then most places where you stay, whether it's a hostel or wherever, there's a thing called a hiker box where people dump stuff that they don't want anymore. And you can rat through that. Maybe there's something you need, or maybe there's something you want to leave. So it just takes something, leave something in the hiker box. And I've found things that I've found useful in there.
You can get cold beer on 0 days.
Yes, that's right, cold beer. So how do you get to trail towns? Well, sometimes you got to hitchhike, or it's not too long a walk, one or the other. But people that live locally, normally there's either one or two type of person. They love you and they'll pick you up, or they hate you and they won't. But you can normally get a ride to town. Or sometimes you go right through the town. This is early in the hike, the Georgia hike. Maybe what, 3 or 4 days into the hike when you come to Neal's Gap?
Yeah, about 3
It's
days
a
in.
big store and camp area. And the thing about Neal's Gap is, you know, they were used to having new hikers come through. They'd been out on the trail for a few days, and they would go through all your stuff and tell you what to get rid of and lighten your load. And so, you know, you'd see people spread out on the floor, and you'd say, "What are you using this for? What's this for?" And so then the stuff you don't need, you can mail home. Now, we met up on one hike. Was that our first hike? I can't remember. With a group of really fun guys from Michigan, and they had packs that were just unbelievable. Well, they got here, and one guy said he mailed home 40 pounds. He had carried the frying pans, the family Bible, all kinds of stuff. And so they really lightened his load up. Other trail towns up further north. Miss Janet's in Irwin, Tennessee. Is that still there, Carolyn? I don't know if Miss Janet's is still there. But I'll tell you, she had this hostel there in Irwin, and that's a pretty normal stop for folks. And I'll tell you a story about her a little later on.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had the mute on.
Okay.
She was driving a shuttle when we hiked the trail in 2018.
Yeah.
But I wasn't even aware that she had her own hostel.
Yeah. Now, well, I'll tell you the story now. A hiking buddy of mine were hiking Vermont, and we were in some town or other having a meal and taking a 0 day. And this lady came up and introduced herself and asked us how we were doing and blah, blah, blah. Well, it turned out it was Miss Janet. And what she did when she wasn't, maybe it was after she gave up this B&B, she'd just drive up and down the trail in her van, shuttling through hikers and helping through hikers out. So she just kind of followed the big glob. Most through hikers started about the same time within 3 or 4 weeks. And she'd just follow that big glob north and help out wherever she could. And I guess that's how you met her.
Yeah, that's what she was doing in 2018.
So it's always nice to meet some new people. These people were happy to shuttle me back to the trail. There's an AT message board there. And I love this sign in Hot Springs. This was at a laundromat. I don't know if you can see that or not. The sign says, "Please keep clothing on while doing laundry. A towel is not acceptable."
But hopefully rain gear is, because that's what most people did their laundry wearing.
I always
rain.
did my
Exactly.
laundry.
My rain kilt, is that
I had my rain gear on. Other than that, I was command. All right, let's talk a little bit about people. You meet all kinds of people that are hiking for all kinds of different reasons, and that can be really interesting. There's old people and young people. I started when I was 60. Carol and her husband were pretty old when they thru hiked.
Yeah, 59,
Yeah.
right up there.
So there's young people and there's old people. There's people that have always wanted to do it, or there's some kind of break in life. Maybe they just graduated from college, or they're taking a year off, or whatever. There's groups of people that might go together, you know. There's people that all they want to do is talk about gear ad nauseum, or how light their equipment is ad nauseum. There's people that go really fast. Now, if you're up section hiking like when I did, but you know, just about the time I got in shape, I was getting off the trail, you know. But these people that were through hiking 15, 20 miles a day up and down those hills, and they're all business. There's people that just like to stay to themselves. You try to chat with them. They're just kind of loners. People that got secrets. When I was in Massachusetts, I was hiking that by myself. I was all alone at the shelter, nobody else there, and this guy comes up and proceeds to tell me all about his sex addiction. And I thought, oh God. So I took a knife out. I took out my sleeping bag, and I barely slept all night. But, you can imagine, especially if you're a woman hiking alone, you can run into things. Now, Christy's, my daughter's husband, when we were hiking together, we ran into a couple of people that just didn't seem right. And Lamar's thing was always to explain to him that he was a karate instructor.
MMA. You knew that you were in trouble because Lamar has like good people senses.
Right.
That if he started just telling somebody, a stranger, that he was an MMA instructor,
Right.
then you knew that his spidey senses did not trust this person, because he does not do that at all. He doesn't teach MMA.
Now I met this guy in one hike, I think in North Carolina. If you notice, he's barefoot, and all of his gear is made out of Tyvek, that's insulation stuff that they use for building homes. But he was hiking the whole trail barefoot. He had been barefoot since he left Vietnam, where a buddy died, and he swore he's going to be barefoot for the rest of his life. He carried some little flip-flops with plastic flowers on them that he had to put on when he went into stores. But other than that, he was hiking barefoot. And hiking barefoot by himself with all the gear being in Tyvek was only the beginning of the strange things about that guy. But I don't know how he did or where he is.
I wonder if he made it through Pennsylvania barefoot.
Well, he talked to us about Pennsylvania because I guess we were south of that, and I think we were in Virginia, and he talked about how the stones really hurt his feet.
Ooh, I bet.
Critters, I've seen one bear from a distance, and that's it. But and I don't want to see bears when I hike. But we met a guy at the beginning of we were hiking the Shenandoah National Park. We met a guy coming out. We said, "How many bears have you seen?" He thought for a minute and said 14, but that wasn't good to hear. But we didn't. We never saw any. But some people do, and you can see deer. The Grayson Highlands have these semi-feral Shetland ponies running around. They still got those, Carolyn?
Yes, and I'll tell you a quick little story. I carried a pound of carrots with me all the way up there for like 3 days. And 1 pound in pack weight is significant. And when we got up there, the ponies would not even touch the carrots. But friends of mine that were with me were feeding them Cheetos and potato chips and Slim Jims. And they would eat all that stuff with salt and they wouldn't touch carrots. So
at that point, I'd have thrown the carrots at them for being so mean.
I couldn't believe it.
Mice are a problem in the shelters, and they'll get into your packs and stuff. You really got to be careful about keeping your stuff away. And snakes, of course, are friendly because they'll eat the mice. But you do have mice problems in the shelters. Plants, plenty of plants. There's blooming flowers here, lots of beautiful trees. I don't really know much about plants. We usually hike by them, but I'm telling you, you got some beautiful hikes through those areas. Now, there's people along the way that like to leave things for hikers. Usually they're thinking through hikers, but they'll leave items for you. Like you'll come along the trail in the middle of nowhere and find a cooler with a sign on it that says, "Please take one." There's water or soda or something like that, or snacks. There's guys that'll park where they can get a road near the trail and set up just to give through hikers food along the way. There's the cookie lady in Massachusetts. Is she still there, Carolyn? I don't know. Tom Lavardi in Dalton, Massachusetts is one of the famous trail angels, and he'll always take you in. But I can remember many times in the middle of nowhere coming across a cooler with water or something like that, and it was great. Let's take a look at a little bit of historical things you can see along the trail. Old property walls. So obviously there used to be a farm here of some sort. Now it's all woods. We came across, I was with you this time, Christy, we came across this hotel in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina.
I think so. I remember that. Yes.
And this was a famous hotel. John Muir stayed at this hotel in his 1,000-mile walk. And now it's just ruins in the middle of nowhere. Kind of cool. Civil War markers, graveyards. A lot of this was on one of my favorite parts was Harper's Ferry up to Duncannon, Pennsylvania. I did with Christy. Well, part of it was Christy. And there was just a lot of history in that area. This is the first Washington Monument. The second one is in Baltimore. And the third one, of course, you know about in Washington, D.C. And the C&O Canal here at Harper's Ferry. I talked about that on my C&O Canal talk a little while ago. kind of in the middle of the nowhere was this state park in Maryland with this huge, 30 or 40-foot memorial built for in honor of Civil War correspondents. Right in the middle of nowhere, they built this huge war correspondent memorial. In Massachusetts, the site of Shays' Rebellion.
Wow.
Look up your history. I don't have enough time to talk about it.
Farm.
Thaddeus Stevens Blacksmith Shop, famous abolitionist. This huge Pine Grove iron smelter here. Ruins of a World War II POW camp. So let's get through some tips here. So we got a few minutes. Getting into shape. You know, you're up and down all day. I don't know, you certainly weightlifting, things like that are good. I always said the best thing to do is make sure you've lost your extra weight so you don't have to lose that on the trail. And put your pack on and do local hikes with your pack on so you get used to it. You know, it fits, you know, it's comfortable. Planning, resupply, you can use those data books and stuff to figure out where the trail towns are, what the address is to mail your food to. Normally I'd carry maybe 4 or 5 days of food, something like that. That's about enough. And then resupply, either buy it or normally I use dehydrated stuff, so I just mail it. You got to have a way to filter your water. Normally, unless there's a drought, there's water available, but you got to filter it. Go as light as you can as far as food and cooking, you know, because every piece of weight counts. Clothes, just enough. Maybe 2 changes of clothes and that's it. I use my rain gear as warm gear. Sometimes in the morning it'd be cold. I'd wear my rain gear on top of my shorts and t-shirt. Brought maybe 2 shorts, 2 t-shirts, and 3 or 4 socks, pair of socks. That was it. You need a tent or hammock or something for sleeping. Go light. Look at what the temperature is on the section you're doing and figure out what kind of sleeping bag you need. Electronics, you know, you're not going to have any Wi-Fi most places, but you need to think about how to recharge when you're out there for 3 or 4 days. You know, those recharging things only last so long. There's a whole thing about first aid in Bill's equipment talk that I think he put a link to. But certainly you want things that'll take care of cuts and that kind of stuff and blisters. You're going to have problems with your feet because they take a pounding going up and down, and so you're going to need something to take care of blisters, something to take care of cuts and that sort of stuff. Hygiene, carry along, you know, some kind of soap so you can wash maybe a little bit in the creek, or bring along liquid stuff, whatever you need. Pack weight. If you're carrying, I would say more than 30, 35 pounds, you're probably carrying too much. And that's with water. And your water weighs a lot. That's a pound a pint. So you have to go light. And to go light, you have to spend some money. You know, if you want a lightweight pack and lightweight sleeping bags and stuff, lightweight tent, it costs money. So you gotta go with that. And there's all kinds of help online and Bill's video to talk about what you need to bring and what you don't need to bring. Other equipment, you know, you obviously need a knife or something. You need some kind of a multi-purpose tool. You certainly need stuff to hang your food at night. A lot of places, the shelters have places where you can hang your food. Otherwise, you got to throw a rope over a tree and hang it up that way, keep it away from bears. A lot of places on the Appalachian Trail now require air canisters, and those are better, but they take up a lot of space. A good place to join the conversation is White Blaze. There they have forums. You can ask questions. They got all kinds of information. So that's a great place to do that. Let's take a look at some pictures. Beautiful pictures from different parts of the trail. There's a beautiful shelter. I believe that was in North Carolina. Max Patch, North Carolina. Beautiful bald. There's some fall colors for you. Again, one of the balds in North Carolina, Tennessee. In the woods. I believe this was coming down the trail into the Nantahala Outdoor Center in North Carolina. There's 3 hiking buddies. When I started out in Harper's Ferry, I was hiking by myself, and I met them outside the B&B, and they invited me to hike along with them. So I hiked along with them for, I don't know, 70 or 80 miles. A few rocks in Pennsylvania. Over the interstate. Little fog up there on top of the mountain. I believe that was in North Carolina. My son-in-law. Me, obviously. And I love this quote right here. Remote for detachment, narrow for chosen company, winding for leisure, lonely for contemplation, the trail leads not merely north and south, but upward to the body, mind, and soul of man. That's it. Thanks a lot.